Hey students, if you look at most modern web pages, even the most basic, they all seem to have one thing in common. What is it, you might ask? They all have pictures. Pictures allow our visitors to visualize content and associate mental images with our site. Whether it's the look of a product, the face of a musical artist, or simply the branding associated with the site, pictures make our site memorable. In this tutorial, we will discuss adding images to our HTML pages. After watching this video in its entirety, you will be able to embed an image in an HTML document using the image element, assign a value to the source attribute, assign alternative text to an image, code the alt attribute for decorative images on a page, and resize an image. I realize that some of these terms may be new to you, like image element and source attribute. Don't worry, as I cover these points, I'll explain these terms when they are introduced. Well, it's time to get to work, so let's roll the promo clip and picture a more interesting web page. Let's start by opening Notepad++. I'll add the required content for a well-formed HTML document. If you need more information on building a well-formed HTML document, check out my video on the topic. Here I'm going to create a web page that has a picture of one of our family pets, Lola. First, I'll provide the H1 element with the text Lola as a puppy. Then I'll save the file as an HTML document named Puppy Lola. I'll run the code in the Chrome browser and the file opens. You'll notice the H1 text appears in the browser, and with this working, we'll add an image. In order to embed an image in an HTML document, we need to add an image element, spelled IMG. The image element uses an empty tagging structure. This means where most tags require an opening and a closing tag like the H1 tag shown here, the image element requires only an opening tag. We never add a closing tag to the image element. We just don't do it. The image element by itself is not enough. Each image element must have a required attribute called the source attribute, spelled SRC. This attribute provides a path to the image. You can think of the path as a set of directions that will take you to the image file that you wish to display. It's important to realize that the file is separate from the HTML file. Where the HTML file ends with an extension like HTM or HTML, the image files that you generally see on websites are JPEG, GIF, or PNG files, but you may see other formats as well. If I return to my PC and open a file exploring window, you'll notice that I have moved an image file, a JPEG file, into the same folder as the HTML file. You'll remember that the HTML file was named Puppy Lola, and you'll notice the image file, which is named Lola Puppy Shot, appears in the same folder. I'll open the image file, and a photograph that my wife took of Lola as a puppy appears. If I want to add this image to my HTML document, I'll return to Notepad++, and I'll add the image element. That's a left-angled bracket, the letters I, M, G, and a right-angled bracket. Next, I'll add the source attribute inside of the image tag. So before the right-angled bracket, I'll type src and assign the source attribute, which is the name of the image file in quotes. Since the image file is in the same folder as the HTML file, the file name and extension are all that is required. When you type the name, make sure that the spelling matches exactly and that you include the file extension. Some servers that host websites run on operating systems that are case sensitive, like Unix. If you don't respect the character case, your picture won't appear on one of these servers. Next, we'll save our work, run the file in the browser, and the picture displays on our page. Now you'll notice that the image is quite large. With large pictures, we might want to adjust the size using the width and height attribute. Every picture has a width and height that can be found by accessing the Details tab of the Properties window on a Windows machine. A right-click on the picture in a File Exploring window will get you there. The width and the height are measured in pixels. The image element in HTML also has a width and height attribute, and this allows us to resize our image on a web page. When the picture is first embedded on the web page like we just did, the picture appears in its actual size. So our picture of Lola appeared on the web page with a width of 1512 pixels and a height of 2016 pixels when it was first added to the web page. We can make the picture larger or smaller by increasing or decreasing the value of the width and height. For example, let's say I want to make the picture 30% smaller than the original size. I would do the math and multiply the width by 30 and the height by 30. With these values calculated, I could provide these numbers in the corresponding width and height attributes of the image element. Notice when assigning these attributes, I put quotes around the value and the letters px. We could also avoid using pixels and just simply type the percentages that we want to increase or decrease the image by. So to decrease our image by 30%, we could simply type 30% as the width and the height attributes. There are a few points you want to keep in mind when resizing images. By resizing only one attribute, the other attribute will automatically size proportionally. For example, if I only change the width in pixels and do not change the height attribute, the height will size proportional to the width. Likewise, if I only change the height in pixels and do not supply a width attribute, the width will size proportional to the height. You want to avoid resizing an image significantly larger. You might notice that pixelation occurs. This is a condition where the distinct pixels in an image are visible. You want to avoid resizing the height and width in pixels that are not proportional. For example, if I resize the height in pixels by multiplying by 20, and I resize the width by multiplying by 130, you'll notice that the image becomes distorted. Lastly, keep in mind that pixels are an absolute measurement and percentages are a relative measurement. For more advanced web development, you'll need to make a decision as to whether to use percentages or pixels. For our purposes, we're not going to get into this discussion. It's a little bit out of our scope. But this would be a good discussion for a future video or research on your own. To assign the width attribute, I type the word width and I assign a value. You might have to do a little bit of experimenting with this, but I'm going to take a guess and say that this picture might need to be resized to about 30% of its size. So I'll type a width of 30% inside of quotes. I'll match the height to the width so there's no distortion. Then I'll save my work and test again. Notice if I went with a smaller size, the image would shrink even more on my page. Now I want to discuss another extremely important attribute called the alt attribute. This attribute provides an alternative text description of a picture. The main purpose of the alt attribute is to provide accessibility to images for people who have visual impairments. Visitors with a visual impairment won't be able to see your picture or the text on a page. Instead, they will rely on a screen reader. This device will either read the text that can be heard or convert the text into Braille that can be read by touch with a Braille reader. The information that you supply as the value to the alt tag inside of quotes will be the text that the screen reader outputs to the visitor. If the image adds to the information on a page, the alternative text should clearly describe the image. If the image is merely decorative, you should code the alt attribute with an empty set of quotes. The important point is that you should always code the images on your page with alt tags. In the United States, it's a legal requirement that all websites ensure accessibility to the content. More importantly, by making your page accessible, you are making the content available to everyone. I'm going to add an alt tag to my image element, and I'll assign the value Lola, a white puppy in a blue sweater. I'll type this information in quotes. I can type anything I want, but the text should accurately describe the content of the image. I'll save my work, and when I display the image, I simply see the image. A screen reader, however, could read the information from the alt tag. To make things interesting, I'll go into my File Exploring window and I'll add a folder called Images. Then I'll move the Lola Puppy Shot JPEG file into the Images folder. Notice that when I return to the browser and refresh the image, the image is no longer there. But you'll notice something interesting. If the image cannot be displayed for any reason, like for example, the image has been moved, the alt attribute will display to describe the contents of the image that should appear. You can see in my browser that because the image was not found, the alternative text, Lola, a white puppy in a blue sweater, appears on the page. What this means is that you should not only provide the alt attribute for accessibility, but also to identify what the visitor would be seeing if the image is not available or cannot be found. As we saw in the last example, it's important to realize that the source attribute is not just the name of the image file, but a path to the file. If the image is in the same folder as the HTML document, we only need to give the image file name and extension as the value assigned to the source attribute. If we move the file into a folder, like we did when we moved the file into the images folder, we will need to supply directions to the image. To get from the HTML file to the image file, we will state the folder name first, then the file name and extension. Since our image, Lola Puppy Shot JPEG, appears directly in the image folder, we can use the path images / lolapuppyshot.jpg. Back in Notepad++, I can update the source attribute to reflect that the Lola Puppy Shot file is in the Images folder. I'll save my work and test the change in the browser. And you'll notice that the image of our furry little friend appears in the browser once again. In this video, we embedded an image file in an HTML document using the image element. I explained that the source attribute is required when you use the image tag because it identifies the path to the image that you wish to embed. We used the source attribute to identify our image file and updated the source when we moved the file to another folder. We also assigned an alternative tag to make our pages accessible to individuals with visual impairments, and we discussed coding decorative elements on a page. Lastly, we talked about resizing images. We've covered a lot of information in this video. I hope you now have a better insight into the workings of images in HTML documents. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you in the next video.